We'll move on to the next topic, and it's the Canada-U.S.-Mexico free trade deal. It's up for review this year, and although it underpins the entire North American economy, President Donald Trump says he doesn't care what happens with it.
I don't even think about USMCA. I mean, you know, I want to see Canada and Mexico do well, but the problem is we don't need their product. We could have it or not. It wouldn't matter to me. I think they want it. I don't really care about it. No real advantage to us. It's irrelevant to me. Canada would love it. Canada wants it. They need it because we don't need Canada product. That's the thing. You know, I want to be a nice person, but we don't need. I want to build the cars here, not in Canada.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mark Carney is on his way to China tonight. There's his plane. This is a live shot. The Prime Minister will be the first Canadian leader to visit that country since 2017, a sign that Canada is ready to re-engage with one superpower while another one withdraws. Okay, Amanda, you mentioned the United States earlier. Let's start with you on this. I don't know what to make of what the president said today because he says versions of this so many times. But this is a delicate situation the Prime Minister is in, re-engaging with a country that not so long ago was maybe the biggest threat to Canadian security in some ways. I mean, what do you make of what the President said and the situation the Prime Minister finds himself in?
Well, if you ever needed evidence as to why the Prime Minister should be looking for partnerships elsewhere, it's a little more of what we're getting used to on the daily, and that's, Trump's chaotic approach to any kind of trade negotiation. The unpredictability factor is so high that you can see that the Carney government is really taking two tracks on this one. Track one is to continue to engage, obviously, with the U.S. to keep those lines open, to be looking forward to a renegotiation of CUSMA. At the same time, really diversifying the trade partners, looking to our second largest trading partner, looking for new partnerships, expanding partnerships, new investments. He's going to China, and then he's off to Qatar, and certainly meetings will be held in Switzerland at the World Economic Forum. This has been his track, I think, almost since the beginning, is realizing, recognizing, and Canadians are certainly, I think, on side with this as well, that nobody can predict what will happen with Trump. Nobody can predict what will happen with the renegotiation of CUSMA. So you have to work these two tracks in parallel. And I think he's doing a good job of reassessing the diplomatic and economic ties to China and looking for opportunities to expose our own resources in some of those other markets.
Emily, what are your thoughts on this one with the president today and where the Prime Minister is headed?
I cannot help but think back of just the recent meeting with oil execs that Donald Trump had over the situation in Venezuela, where you had this surreal situation where Donald Trump is saying, this is the way we're going to run the economy, basically dividing up a country as if it was his personal territory, and actually having Exxon and, other oil CEOs being, wait a minute, this is not necessarily how things are done. So this is not necessarily a safe way for us to have investments, given that the situation in the country is still very much unstable. You cannot just colonize like that and assure us that there's not going to be any resistance. Obviously, that's not exactly what any CEO said. I'm paraphrasing with my own mind. When it comes to Canada, it's a similar situation in the sense that Donald Trump is saying a lot of things. At the end of the day, I'm not sure that American CEOs are necessarily following his logic that CUSMA doesn't really matter to the Americans. So I think we're likely to have eventually a sort of a surreal conversation, a similar surreal conversation in which, and we've already had some of those in which part of the American economy is like, but Mr. President, what exactly is going on?
I'm just going to interject, just let people know that's Prime Minister Mark Carney making his way towards the plane. Sorry, Emily, I will let you finish your thought. My apologies.
Yes.
But
no worries.
The Prime Minister is about to leave Canada to head off to China. The first time the head of the Canadian government has traveled to that country since 2017. Former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien was there last week or the week before. And Scott Moe has also recently returned from there as part of an effort to get the canola tariffs lifted. Mark Carney waving goodbye, giving a fist pump, I guess, towards the calf soldier there at the top of the stairs as he heads off to try to pull a very difficult relationship out of the deep freeze, and with some editorials from Chinese state aligned media suggesting that he needs to be fairly obsequious, it seems, in terms of divorcing themselves from the United States. So, sorry, Emily, back to you just to finish up your point there. I just wanted we wanted to note that moment as the Prime Minister leaves for China.
Of course you did. I just think to finish the point that there are some elements of the sector of the Canadian-U.S. trade relationship. For example, the automobile industry, that's going to be very hard for things to go back to the way they were before Trump was reelected. But there are other sectors in which obviously the Americans do depend on Canadian supply. And that if you have tariffs, you do impact the price of goods in the U.S. And that is just a reality that at some point, part of the American economy is going to have to make that point to the White House.
Yeah, Nathan, using that example of the oil executives, I think it was the ExxonMobil CEO said Venezuela is uninvestable, right? And Peter Armstrong was talking about this on the show. Throughout all the trade hearings, every business leader who showed up, to the USTR hearing said, you've got to keep this deal. We build stuff together. It's good for everybody. And there is this divorce from the people who actually hire people and sign the front of checks and the White House itself when it comes to the path forward on all of this stuff.
Well, let's not get it confused. Trump was never all that great at business. So the fact that he's not listening to the business leaders in the US, outside of the tech bros that are lining up and making algorithms work for him, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. I'm still trying to get over the idea that he said he wants to be a nice person. I mean, I've just never seen an administration filled with so much cruelty. Never mind, I mean, conservative, left, whatever. There's an element of cruelty within his leadership and the leadership of the people around him, and inconsistency over the idea that trading with Canada is important and that America has all the natural resources that it needs and all the manufacturing that it needs, and they're going to start to make pants and running shoes again. I mean, yeah, devoid from reality for sure. All this to me seems about midterms. What is he able to accomplish, demonstrate to the American people? Can he get through the midterms and hold the House and keep the power that he needs to keep? If he doesn't, I think Canada biding its time on our trade relationship with the US is probably the smartest move we can do, and just kind of ignore the noise, open up as many conversations around the world, but also how wary does Prime Minister Carney have to be in dealing with China? We have a recent and long track record of unreliability, distrust for some solid evidentiary reasons that China is important, but are they a trusted trade partner? Can they be? Can they be relied upon? These are open questions, and they're serious questions, never mind the human rights and everything else that used to be the front and center of Canadian trade policy. It has obviously diminished a little bit, but I mean, Mr. Carney's got to, and never mind the domestic, right? We've talked about this before. How does he keep Premier Ford and Mo happy if he makes some kind of deal on EVs to satisfy farmers on the prairies?
Yeah, and Bloomberg is suggesting that China is looking for that, an offer maybe to lower
Exactly right.
the canola tariffs specifically in return for something on EVs. Lisa, I don't know how to interpret what the president said. I don't know if he's truly just bored and disinterested in CUSMA at this point, truly doesn't care, or this is posturing, or if it all changes tomorrow. How do you see it?
I think the tell is at the very end of his availability when he referenced the Supreme Court decision coming. And
That's right.
I think if I could make a bold prediction, which I will regret probably, if the Supreme Court rules in his favor, I think you'll see him rip up CUSMA, and I think you'll see him unilaterally apply tariffs to whatever sector he wants to apply to in whatever way. And I think the reason why is they're treating the money from tariffs like it's a GST, like it's their own value add tax, and they're not going to want to give up on it. So I see that if he gets any kind of signal from the Supreme Court that it's, it's okay to do it, I don't have a lot of hope that any kind of negotiation is going to happen with respect to CUSMA. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Can I just say one thing about Mr. Carney? I'm really glad he's going to China. But I think we should remember that it's not like we're going to China out of the goodness of our own heart. China has a bone to pick with us too. I mean, back in 2022, Mr. Trudeau got in a little trouble because they had a private meeting. He went to the press. Xi did not like what Mr. Trudeau said to the press. And basically that froze everything in time. That was it. There's not, he actually said to Mr. Trudeau in public, you know, don't do that kind of thing to me. So I think the first principles for Mr. Carney is just to open up a line of dialogue, and maybe EV deals are way down the list. Maybe that's another trip. But certainly he's got to thaw out these relations and show him it's a different regime in place here in Canada.
But, you know, Amanda, there is this push-pull of all of these things, right? That there's the value of the trade, and then there's the values of the country. And when we saw when Marie-France Lalonde and Helena Jaczek, you know, ended their trip to Taiwan early to avoid unsettling the Chinese regime, because apparently that's a bridge too far, one may be trumping the other, right? So how do you calibrate this if you're the Liberal Prime Minister?
Yeah, and not only just that, but also concerns around what is on the table. So, of course, you know, looking at canola and pork and seafood and those industries that have been hit hard by these high tariffs. And at the same time is the reciprocal, which has been mentioned, Chinese EVs. And what does that mean to the Canadian auto sector? So there's a push and pull around industry. There's a push and pull around human rights, as we saw through the two Michaels, the Huawei executive, which wasn't that long ago. And we understand that a regime like that can turn on a dime. So in negotiations that could occur today can be totally upended tomorrow based on a human rights issue. So I do think that, you know, there's a lot at stake, but at the same time, as the second largest trading partner, they absolutely must look to diversify these trading relationships. To be able to increase the diplomatic and the economic ties is going to be very important to Canadians' economic future. So I think, you know, if you're going to, it's not necessarily a gamble, but if you have to push this one a little bit, this is the one to push in my mind, because it provides the, you know, probably the biggest benefit, the biggest rewards, even if there are risks at stake.
Okay, we've got to leave it there because we've got to get to what's happening in Iran and what's happening in the United States of America. Amanda Alvaro, Lisa Raitt, Nathan Cullen, Emily Nicola, thank you all so much for being here today.